هلا ويا هلا ويا هلا ويا هلا حن قلبي على جمعة الخير هلا حن قلبي على جمعة الخير هلا يا هلا ويا هلا ويا هلا ويا هلا يا هلا ويا هلا ويا.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum and welcome to the Saturday edition of Let's Talk with me, Julie Alli. Great to be with you, and I do hope you're going to enjoy the interviews we have lined up for you. We'll be talking the little green number, and if you're wanting to know what that is all about, you're going to have to stay tuned because it is the last interview for the morning. We're also going to talk to Rashida Khan. You might remember her from an interview with me last year when we spoke about her book, the book that she had written at the time. She's here once again to talk about the next book, and that is called Fragrance of Forgiveness. Can't wait for that interview to unfold. But first up, we are all aware of the terrible devastation and destruction that wreaked havoc on Mozambique, Malawi, and I think it is Zimbabwe. The other two countries kind of didn't get the worst brunt of the horrible Idai cyclone or tornado, but Mozambique is reeling under the backlash of the cyclone. We know that international aid agencies all around the world, especially from South Africa, have flocked down to the devastated areas to help as best they can, as much as they can. And one such organization that is always in the forefront of any disaster area anywhere around the world is Doctors Without Borders. So we're going to talk to them about what the organization is all about. How do they plan for such eventualities, natural disasters and other such disasters? What's their plans of action? How ready are they to hit the ground running? In studio with me is the lovely Monica Genya. She's a supply manager at Doctors Without Borders, and she also tells me, wait for this, she's been working for them for the past 25 years. Good morning and welcome to the program.
Good morning, thank you.
That's an amazingly long time. You have quite a history with them, don't you?
I really do. I first started working with Doctors Without Borders in my home country of Kenya and have worked with them around the world.
Wow. So you've traveled, and have you finally settled down here in South Africa, put down roots in South Africa?
Well, I'm not sure that anybody from Doctors Without Borders puts down permanent roots, but I am stationed here for the time being, yes.
Okay. You started out, it was your first job right out of school.
Yes.
Why did you do it? And 25 years later, you are still with them. What's the story?
My country of Kenya hosts a number of refugees from neighboring countries who have a lot of unique needs, especially medical needs. And it was my desire to help out with those needs. Doctors Without Borders is very present in refugee camps in my country, and that's how I got involved with them.
And you are still involved with them?
Still involved, yes.
Never ever thought of changing career paths?
Not for a minute.
You obviously are a paid worker there. Yes. As with any large corporation, you need some core people to run the organization and make sure that the clock ticks all of the time, that it runs like absolute clockwork. If not, things are just going to fall apart at the seams. So what does your core team look like? And I know you have core teams in all countries around the world.
Yes, so we have teams based everywhere in the world, and what we are renowned for is emergency preparedness. So we would have a team that would have somebody in charge of supply, somebody in charge of logistics and security, somebody to be in charge of the team itself, and then our medical personnel, our doctors, our nurses, our psychologists.
And those are the people who volunteer their services. Am I correct?
Yes, in fact, what happens with MSF is that even though we are paid professionals, the payment is small enough that in fact we are considered volunteers.
So you don't earn big corporate checks?
No.
You do it for the love of the work?
Yes, absolutely.
That's amazing. Yes. You talk about medical personnel. If somebody signs up with you to serve some time, what's the minimum time you require from them or the maximum time?
So, well, I've been around for 25 years, so there's no maximum time, but we do require you to be able to serve at least 6 months when we first take you on, and we send you off to work with MSF anywhere in the world. So at least 6 months on the ground.
The criteria to qualify to work for MSF, and we do know it's purely voluntary, you will cover, I'm assuming, you will cover the doctor or whoever it is, you'll cover their transport costs, and I presume you'll feed them, yes. Give them 3 meals a day, yes. And give them a bed to sleep on. Yes. Apart from that, nothing else.
We will have a small stipend for people to be able to take care of themselves while out in the field. And we do look for professionals, so we would expect that you have worked a year or two in your chosen profession before you come to us, so that you can bring your professional expertise to the ground where it's most needed.
What's the criteria? Because I should imagine, despite the fact that I might be a nurse, a doctor, or even a psychologist, I should imagine there are very strict rules in place to get me on board. What would they be? What would kind of almost disqualify me to be considered to be part of Doctors Without Borders?
Well, we would go through an application process, so you would apply to become part of our pool of doctors or nurses or supply logisticians like myself, and then we would have a chance to speak with you, go through your CV, but we're very interested in your professional qualifications, and we're interested to see that you've proven yourself as a professional. So if it is a doctor, then it's somebody who's already worked as a doctor that we would send out. We're very careful that we would send out only the most professional people to respond to our beneficiaries on the ground.
And in terms of new doctors or older doctors, what about retired doctors? You know, there are people who've kind of reached, I wouldn't say, they've reached their retirement years, but they still believe that they have so much to give. And they believe this is, you know, humanitarianism is the road to go. Would you look at people like that? Or perhaps are they a risk in any way? Their age?
No, absolutely. In fact, a large percentage of people who go out with us are people who have either retired or are at a point in their career where they're settled enough. You know, they've already bought a house, or their children have already left home.
The nest.
Yes, and they have the time to volunteer with us. They have the time to give to our beneficiaries. So we do have a lot of, as you say, people who are retired or on their way to retirement, and they're not at risk at all. So of course, any one of our people who we send to the field has to be physically able and strong and healthy. But beyond that, we welcome everyone.
And the minimum time required is 6 months. You have to serve a 6-month stint. Let me understand why. I'm thinking in this busy life of ours, you might have a professional who decides he or she would like to give off their time, but they can't afford 6 months. Could they break it up in any way? Is that a possibility?
I'm thinking that, you know, with all rules, something could, of course, be sorted out, but it's very important that we have a kind of a longevity in the field. Our beneficiaries are the most important at this stage, and they really need to have somebody on the ground who first understands the context and then grows to be able to respond to it adequately, and 6 months really is the period where that can be done.
Now, you are a supply manager, and you also spoke about other personnel on board, like someone who's specialized or studied logistics, etc.
Yes.
How important is it to have that type of personnel? Give us an idea, an overview of what your structure looks like and just how ready you are to hit the ground running in any disaster area. We know that Doctors Without Borders, and we need to commend people like Gift of the Givers and other such organizations, Africa Muslims agencies, etc., that are first, amongst the first that pitches up at a disaster area and tries to do everything possible. How important is it that they kind of hold hands with you and work together? Because you might be duplicating services.
Yes.
You might be tramping on each other's toes, etc.
Yes.
So let's start with the first issue in terms of logistics and how you guys strategize together to make sure that the relief gets to the right people on time.
Yes. So basically, if you're talking about a cyclone and its after effects, as we've seen in Mozambique, we will go to a place where there is no electricity and where the floods have devastated the housing and there are no roofs on the clinics or people's shelters. So we would require electricians, professional electricians, to come with us to set up generators so that we can get working, we can start working.
So electricians watching us this morning can apply to become part of the team.
Yes.
Let's hold that thought and hear about all other types of people from different walks of life who could apply and be part of this amazing organization, Doctors Without Borders. We need to take an ad break. We'll be back in a minute or two. Monica Genia is here. She's with Doctors Without Borders, giving us a behind the scenes of what happens with organizations like Doctors Without Borders when there's a disaster prone area or disaster strikes somewhere. People like Monica and her organization, or even Gift of the Givers and other such organizations, what is their plan of action in place that they are so active and effective going forward in disaster areas? We're talking to Doctors Without Borders. Monica Genia is in studio talking about the behind-the-scenes preparations when disaster strikes, how they roll into action and make certain that they're able to supply all the necessary support and humanitarian aid to the devastated people or country. What sort of preparation or training is given to people who apply with you? You just spoke about electricians. I had no idea in my mind that you take on electricians as volunteers. What other personnel would you consider to be part of your team in a voluntary capacity?
So we're talking about administrators, so somebody who would be in charge of stationery and paperwork and human beings
in the field,
and getting people around and making sure that they're comfortable and they're professionally managed. We're talking about human resource managers. We would deal with architects. We would deal with
architects. Why?
Again, when we are trying to rehabilitate a structure that has been devastated by the cyclone, for example, in Mozambique.
So it's not only about going in and seeing to the sick and the wounded. It's way bigger than all of that.
Yes. Often Doctors Without Borders might be the only people on the ground. If we have partners, as you've mentioned,
Gift of the Givers,
other organizations, then we will work hand in hand with them. Of course, it's not a competition at all, and we want to make sure that the beneficiaries are the ones that we're focused on. So we will work with our partners. If there's somebody else already doing rehabilitation, then we don't need to. But if we are, in fact, the only ones or the first ones on the ground, we are not able to see to the patients until we have a secure structure, etc. In that case, we would work on securing it ourselves. So it's just,
and that's where the architect,
and that's where an architect might come in
to come and assist.
Yes, maybe for a few
or
weeks,
a builder,
a few months, and then get sent off to another disaster area where they might be needed, or a builder, etc. cholera. We also work with water and sanitation engineers. In the case of the cyclone, for example, there is no clean water. Boreholes and other sources have been contaminated.
Absolutely.
We need our water and sanitation engineers to come and work on fixing that as quickly as possible, because if that is not done, then we have outbreaks of cholera.
Which we're seeing right now as we speak in Mozambique.
Yes, we
and
are.
we'll get to that issue in a moment. And we also know that as far as cholera is concerned, the outbreak of other waterborne diseases are very prevalent, and other diseases. So personnel are at risk, but we're going to talk about that in a minute or two. Let's just exhaust the issue around other personnel.
Yes.
I just thought the perception was that it's only restricted to medical professionals. We're now opening up, by way of this conversation with you, a whole new world of possibilities for all of our viewers who probably have been wanting to do voluntary work but just didn't think they'd fit in. So who else would qualify? Let's talk. I'm thinking cooks, perhaps, people who are cooks, because you're going to need someone to prepare your meals.
Absolutely. No, when we work on the ground, so there are certain personnel that we can probably quickly hire in a local context wherever we are. So if we have a cook, if we have a driver, if we have somebody to guard the facilities.
And create a bit of employment
and
in that
create employment,
process.
Absolutely, in that area. So we would hire them on the ground at the time, and then when we leave, we would leave them in their area. But when we are talking about certain professions which may not easily be found in certain areas, we work in places like Somalia, for example, where civil war has devastated the country to the point where there are almost no medical professionals to be found in the areas where we go to work. So then we would take our electricians and our builders and our architects, our human resource managers, etc., with us.
Okay, earlier on you spoke about medical professionals. You also mentioned psychologists.
Yes.
I'm wondering about the psychologists going into the field, very especially in terms of language differences or language barriers.
Yes.
So if a psychologist applies to Doctors Without Borders, does he or she need to be multilingual, for example, or is English sufficient to carry them through?
So having more than one language is encouraged. It's a big world, and we've noticed that just speaking one language is not enough anymore these days. Oftentimes, you might not speak the language of the place where you're being sent, but if we're talking about Mozambique, we really would like medical professionals, especially psychologists, to speak Portuguese, to be able to speak the language of the beneficiaries. If that is not at all possible, then we would have translators. But our first choice is to have people who speak the language.
Let's talk now the issue in Mozambique.
Yes.
How prepared were you guys, and how soon did you go to the ground or into the field, whatever terminology is appropriate here, when a cyclone, was it not? Cyclone Idai hit.
Yes.
How soon did you guys go in, and who goes in to assess just how dire the situation is?
Okay, so the cyclone hit on the 15th of March, and we were on the ground on the 18th, three days.
Unbelievable.
Yes. So we already have an emergency pool, an emergency team in place of people who we can take, at least a logistician, somebody from supplies, medical personnel.
And they do the assessments.
And they do the assessment. They are experienced. They've been to flood areas before. They've been to emergencies before. So they already know what they're looking for. Once they're on the ground, they can give information back to the various headquarters where we are, and then ask for what is needed. So if in that case you need an electrician, then they would say, we need an electrician immediately, and then we can start supplying and ramping up. At the moment we have 70 international staff and 200 Mozambican staff in Beira working to support the activities of the response.
Now we know you've spoken about the outbreak of cholera in that part of the world, and there's a possibility of other waterborne diseases.
Yes,
and also, after the cleanup operation, we do know when the waters recede, more and more, sadly, bodies are going to surface, which just indicates that there's a greater risk to the volunteers and the people in the area. What measures are you putting in place? And obviously, loved ones of volunteers that are working in that part of the world are really worried about, the volunteers possibly succumbing to those illnesses, diseases that are going around. What precautions are in place?
So yes, nothing is 100% guaranteed, but MSF works really hard to ensure the health and security of the people who are working for us, whether they're national or international staff. So in all the time I've been working with MSF, I've always felt very secure and very well looked after by the organization. The focus is in fact on the devastation at the moment. 91,000 homes have been destroyed, 128,000 people in Beira, in the area, completely displaced with nowhere to stay. So these kind of huge demands are what is occupying our staff's time and their thoughts at the moment.
Now, I know you said that you require people to serve 6 months at a time,
yes.
but in a situation, and we're going to use Mozambique as an example, Beira as an example, and you've just mentioned numbers there, which is pretty overwhelming.
Yes.
How long would you stay? And I should imagine the Mozambican government would also be assisting in these situations. How long would MSF remain on the ground to help rebuild infrastructure and look after the health and well-being of the people?
So MSF, in fact, will stay as long as we are needed. If there are other international organizations that are able to take over some of the activities that we started or to respond in other ways, we will allow them to do so. As you know, we're needed everywhere in the world, and we go to some places where there is nobody else at all. We are happy that there are other partners working in Beira at the moment. The needs are so huge in Beira, so we will stay as long as the government, as long as our partners need us to be there. MSF has been in Mozambique since 1984, responding to HIV, TB, and other emergencies that come and go, and we're not going to be leaving anytime soon.
And I should imagine if people have signed up for 6 months only, there are other people who prolong their stay or their relationship with you.
Yes.
But as someone's term comes to end, you just roll over. They go back home and you bring new
Somebody
people
else,
in.
yes,
two very quick issues before we wrap up is, what about somebody who kind of has some sort of a mental breakdown? Because, I mean, being exposed to that type of situation, very especially in war-torn regions, and I do know that you try and protect them as much as you can. What sort of facilities or support or counselling is in place to make sure that they're being taken care of?
Yes, so we do have mental health workers, we have counsellors, we have psychologists that accompany us, and they're there for our beneficiaries, but they're there for our staff as well. So we ensure that our staff's well-being is paramount.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Otherwise, you're going to be without people.
Absolutely.
And finally, if I sign up with Doctors Without Borders, what training will I be undergoing and for how long?
Well, it depends on what we're going to use your skills for. So if you were a doctor and we were planning to send you to a place where we wanted you to use your skills for HIV TB projects, for example, we may send you on a course for 2 weeks, for example, that prepares you for that kind of work. So it depends on the kind of work we're taking you to respond to.
And disaster management as well. That's very crucial.
Very crucial, yes.
And obviously you've got to sensitize the person to those, because it might be something they've never been exposed to in their life. Yeah. In closing, there's scores of people watching us this morning, and those people who thought that they could never make a difference, they've now heard it doesn't matter what skill they have, it could be utilized by joining Doctors Without Borders. What do you have to say to them, number one, and how else can we assist you to continue doing the amazing work you're doing?
No, I think that I personally, and I might be biased, think that Doctors Without Borders is doing amazing work, and we are crying for all of you to come out and join us and support us in whatever way that you can. So if it's to apply to join our field teams, that's great. And if it's to donate to support our work, that is also very great. Either way, do visit our website. It's www.msf.org.za to donate, to apply, to support, and to just see what we're doing around the world.
How you can make a positive difference.
Yes.
Keep up the great work.
Thank
and
you.
Finally, have South Africans been very supportive to
Yes,
MSF, and are more and more
absolutely.
people volunteering to become a part of MSF?
Yes, South Africans have been amazing in their support of MSF, and I feel that the solidarity, the Ubuntu that we find in this country is exactly what MSF has been looking for.
Monica Gagne, thank you indeed for giving us a glimpse behind the scenes of MSF. Continue doing the amazing work you guys are doing, and may you grow from strength to strength.
Thank you.
My pleasure. That was Monica Gagne talking to us about Doctors Without Borders. And yes, there is a great need. And if you've been sitting home for months on end, you have certain skill sets and you believe you can utilize them, well, perhaps here's where you can join up and make a huge difference in people's lives. And welcome back. Next in studio, gives me great pleasure to greet and to introduce you to our lovely guest. She is Rashida Khan. You may remember her from last year when she came in to talk about her book, Mirror Cracked. It's an award-winning book, and she's now written the sequel to the book, which is called Fragrance of Forgiveness. And if I cast my mind back to that interview, I remember distinctly asking her, is there a second book in the pipeline? And she smiled and she says, I'm actually working on that book. And here she is back in studio a couple of months later, talking about a Fragrance of Forgiveness. This is what the cover looks like, and as I've said, it's a sequel. And let's get talking about this book. Assalamu alaikum, welcome to the program.
Wa alaikum assalam, Julie. Thank you for having me.
Lovely to have you here again. And are you recovered? Because writing a book is exhausting work, mentally, emotionally, physically, and spiritually, I should imagine.
You've captured that completely, because I don't know if some of your readers may have read Mirror Cracked already. It's not an easy book to read. Much as people can't put it down, it's also not an easy book to read. So imagine if reading that book is not easy. It takes a lot out of me to write that book. And alhamdulillah, it was very emotionally draining, and you're right, spiritually draining as well. Both the Mirror Cracked and Fragrance of Forgiveness. But because Fragrance of Forgiveness was the resolution of all the turmoil and conflict and everything that happens in Mirror Cracked, it's a much more hopeful book. And it is a much more spiritual book. The characters are Muslim. None of them are very, very strict Muslim, but they identify and completely live their lives as Muslims. And a lot of this, without being religious, is it's about Azra's spiritual journey to come to accept what has happened to her. Azra is the main character of the books.
How do you draw? How did you, with Mirror Cracked, this is a sequel, so you just kind of move on with the same characters, and I should imagine Fragrance of Forgiveness is really a healing.
Yes.
A healing
Yes.
for the characters,
Yes.
because they'd really been through a lot in Mirror Cracked. But taking you back to Mirror Cracked,
Yes.
we talked about how exhausting it is. Where did you find the inspiration in all of these characters going through this torrid time in their lives?
Honestly speaking, from the characters themselves. They're very real to me. And they actually lead the story. Much as I had an idea of the story and I knew where it was going to go and what the basic plot outline was, a lot of it changed and developed because these characters were so lifelike and so real to me. And they have a mind of their own. And if you read Mirror Cracked, you will appreciate how, I think you should appreciate how much of time I spent on getting the characters right, on making them individual and recognizable and very real. So my characters are very honest and authentic.
Almost so that the reader can identify.
Completely.
That, oh yes, he or she reminds me of so-and-so,
So-and-so.
my brother,
Oh,
my husband, my
exactly.
mother, etc.
Exactly.
And it makes the read so much more enjoyable, so real.
So real, and so, because you're engaging with it. I mean, a lot of the people wanted all of those characters to have happy endings because they were so in touch with them. They became so close to them. Some people who put Mirror Cracked down said, when is the sequel coming out? I'm missing my friends already. These are real people to me.
You mentioned happy endings.
Yes.
Sadly, we know that life is not all about happily ever after. A lot
Correct.
of us have a lot of heartbreak, sadness, and abuse, possibly even abused lives, etc. So I don't think anybody's life is an absolute fairy tale. Yes, we have our challenges. Yes, we have our great moments, but what we're going through is life.
Yes.
Life is not about happily ever after. Happy endings, do you think that, or do you go for happy endings, or how do you kind of get to that place, or get to a place of closure without disappointing your readers?
So personally, I'm actually a very positive person. So, excuse me, I'm always looking forward, I'm always looking up, I'm always trying to see the light at the end of the tunnel. I'm not saying that I don't have challenges or that I live a hunky-dory or, wear rose-tinted glasses. It's not like that. But I do understand that life is full of challenges. Life is full of problems. Life is full of disappointments.
It's how you look at it.
And how you look at it and how you relate to it afterwards. What happens to you after that disappointment? It's not that the disappointment happened or the fight happened, because fights will happen, husband and wife, mother and daughter, sisters, fights will happen. And it doesn't mean that you don't love each other or you can't work through it. It's how we react to things after. So, and that always means you have to look up, you have to move forward. And a big part of that is being able to let things go. So,
and I should imagine a big part of that is also to be able to forgive, and I'm going to add a rider there, to forgive and to forget. I've often heard people saying, I forgive you, but I'll never ever forget what you've done to me.
Exactly,
There's certain people who say, it's okay to forgive, you don't have to forget. But my thinking is that if you're forgiving conditionally, that's, it's conditionally, because if I'm saying to you, I'll forgive you, but I'll never forget, I'm still holding on to all of that that toxic
that
thoughts.
toxicity, and that is so damaging to you. So I learned this some time ago myself. What happens when something happens and somebody hurts you or upsets you, or you feel that hurt, you feel that anger, you feel all of that, right? And that person has done it to you, or that's how we see it at the time, or with circumstances, but that's happened to you. Then it's over. But by us reliving it each time, thinking about that story, that fight, that thing that happened to me, how I was wronged, we're living that over and over again. Each time we're feeling that hurt again, we're renewing that feeling, we re-energize, giving energy to the wrong part of the feeling, that hurt feeling. And so how do we move forward? So the first time around, that was inflicted on us, and we just had to take it. The second time around, we're actually inflicting that hurt on ourselves. So if you don't want to forget, if you do want to hold on to the past, you're actually doing only yourself a great disservice. The other person, the other party is probably moved on and carrying on with life, or they have other things to worry about and think about. It's us who keeps doing this to ourselves that's actually damaging ourselves. It's so important to let things go, honestly. And I've learned the hard way, don't think I've got it all figured out.
So this book is about moving on.
Absolutely.
And I love the title, because in forgiveness there is so much of sweetness and so much of fragrance.
So beautiful.
Forgiveness
Yes.
is so calming. It sets you free.
Absolutely.
Forgiveness sets you free, and a lot of us don't know that. We think we're being the bigger person by holding out and saying, I'll never forgive you, I'll forgive you, I won't forget. You also have a beautiful saying here in the book by Bernard Meltzer, which says, when you forgive, you in no way change the past, but you sure do change the future. Explain that to us.
Well, it's like I've been saying, if you hold on to things, you're just going to be miserable. But if you try and let things go, and I'm not saying it's easy or it's going to happen overnight, but I think initially what you need to do is be aware of it. So you actually listen to yourself, or you watch yourself and you say, okay, I see what you did there. You went through that whole drama all over again, deciding why you should have said this and done that at the time, and replaying it. And now you're all upset and you're worked up and you have to now let this. So each time you're doing it, you must just be aware that this is happening, so that the next time you either stop it sooner or you touch wood, eventually you don't even start it.
And those movies that we're allowed to play out in our minds are so dangerous.
I'm telling you, I'm telling you. And then they're completely one-sided as well. You're only
Right.
seeing things from your point of view.
Of
You're not
course.
even talking to the next person and hearing whatever they have to think or say about it.
How different, of course, it is very different, because here you're talking about forgiveness, and I should imagine a lot of closure
Yes,
and moving on.
absolutely.
How did you get to this point? Because Mirror Cracked was about a lot of pain. Are we going to come across any more pain as far as the characters are concerned? We also know that, and we don't want you to give away too much, because we
Yes.
want people to go out and read the book.
Yes.
But we know that Azra went through literally hell
Yes.
in the first book.
Right.
So is this the softer side of life?
Absolutely. And again, it's Azra's story, so it's all her doing. It's all her, decisions and all her coming to terms with things. Because for a long time, after what happened to Azra in the first book, in Mirror Cracked, this book actually picks up 2 years later. And in those 2 years, all she's done is existed without living. She's not let go of the pain, she's not let go of the horror, and in fact, to protect herself from more pain and horror, what she does is she builds this wall around herself, around her heart, and she keeps everyone at bay. So she doesn't even have anyone to be able to talk to and engage with and start working these things out. She's at nowhere ready at the end of the first book to start going down this journey. And then, of course, things happen which force her to realize and force her to understand that she has to move on and she has to let go. And it's a process for her to be able to work through these things. And, again, without giving too much away, I think there is a happy ending. Maybe not the ending or the conclusion that every reader or some readers would have hoped for or wanted, but there is definitely light at the end of the tunnel.
Okay, hold that thought. We'll be back in a minute or two.
Thank you.
Rashida Khan is in studio talking to us about her second book, Fragrance of Forgiveness. And for those of you who read her first book, Mirror Cracked, I think this is a must read. It is out on the shelves already. We're going to ask her where and at what price, but we'll talk more about the book and these amazing characters right after the ad break. Fragrance of Forgiveness is the book we're discussing this morning by Rashida Khan. She authored the first book, Mirror Cracked, and this is the sequel to the book. And of those of you who read Mirror Cracked and wanted more and wanted to know how Azra's journey continues, the answer lies in Fragrance of Forgiveness. When was the launch of the book?
I launched in Durban on the 16th of March and in Johannesburg on the 19th of March.
And how are the sales going?
They could go better, but like I say to everybody, it's absolutely fine. Once you've bought the book and you've read it, please share it, because much as I'd like my book to be sold, I'd love it more to be read.
Oh, there you go.
I think it's a very, very important book to be read. One of the ladies who read this first initially, she came back to me and she said, are you sure this is fiction? It should be in the self-help section. Wow. But also there's a lot of very important discussions that need to be had in our communities and in our societies. And I think this kind of book could stimulate those discussions so that we're not always trying to sweep things under the carpet, things that are contrary to what we think should be spoken about. We're not just pushing them aside. We're actually acknowledging the problem, listening, and being able to talk about them.
And you're saying that we as South African Indians, Muslims, would be able to identify with all of these issues. That I should actually imagine life, it's a global issue.
It's completely
you
global.
You could be in the UK, the US, or wherever.
Absolutely.
You would be able to identify.
Everybody could identify with this.
Right.
And not only women. I've had good feedback from men who've read the book as well, that they've really enjoyed this book. I think a couple of things. I mean, my writing is very accessible. Much as it's a difficult read in terms of what is happening to the people, it's an easy read. The writing is very accessible. People are quickly...
it's everyday English language.
It's everyday English language. So obviously for Muslims and South African Muslims specifically, it's set in that context, and that's because they say you must write what you know. So that's what I know, and that's what I will write. But definitely the issues are completely global. They would cut across any cultural, racial, religious lines, and everybody would identify, I'm sure.
You talk about self-help. Someone came up to you and said,
Yes.
this is almost like a self-help. And you're also talking about issues that we kind of avoid or sweep under the carpet. And I think we in South Africa, we as a Muslim community are very guilty of that, simply because of shame and judgment. We don't want to be judged because then we feel as if we're failures. Talk to me about some of those issues that you've raised here, and how can we get past the shame and own up to all of the demons in our lives?
You know, I think that's a personal journey, and it's actually not an easy one to answer, because I think keeping things hidden or keeping things within the family is such an ingrained thing amongst us. And I actually fear for that, because I think that is what causes the problems to go completely out of control. You know, I often say a lot of mirror cracked is about identity and trying to figure out who you are. Azra herself, because all of a sudden her whole world has fallen apart, and you know, her identity is attached to who she is and what she does. And if that's not happening anymore, she's not this perfect wife and mother and successful career woman, who is she? And it's also about trying, for Farid, her husband, is going through his challenges and trying to identify himself. So if a person is going through this, maybe a youngster is going through this, if he or she doesn't feel safe to come in our family home to talk about these things because you're afraid of being judged, you're afraid of being shouted at or frowned upon because these things are not supposed to be like that, it's not, who are you going to go talk to? You might go onto the internet, you might ask a friend who may or may not be Muslim, who may not have that understanding or context. And we know that when problems arise, there's a solution in Islam. There's a solution in, or at least there's a way to look at it in that context. And that's the way we should be addressing things. So if we don't actually talk about these things, if we push these things under the carpet, it's really dangerous for us. It's something we should be afraid of. I know there was another part to the question.
I'm also wondering about the realization, the whole thing around judgment,
yes,
and the whole thing about support.
Absolutely.
How do you kind of own up to the problems? You don't want to publicize to the whole world what's going on in your life.
And of course.
You know, but you also want family to know where you're at, family and friends, so that you get the type of support
that you need. You get the empathy and the understanding.
How does one navigate that space?
So, you know, it's
difficult because,
it's
again,
a very
the
difficult
judgment
thing to do, because Islam is a complete religion, so much so that it will govern and have an answer and solution for everything. So this is how things are right, and this is how things are not. So, you know, we are sort of quite, I wouldn't say restricted, but we are sort of quite aligned in that sense. There is a right and a wrong. There is a black and a white, you know. We have very few gray areas, I would imagine. But at the end of the day, we have to understand one thing, which is very, very important. And I've tried very hard in my writing to make sure I don't sound or come across as judgmental. So I'm saying the story like it is without trying to get my opinion on it, because I feel nobody else can judge except Allah. We have to know and understand that. And the other thing that's very important to remember is that Allah loves all of us, no matter what we're doing, whether we think we're the greatest sinners and all. But Allah does love all of us, and if we are sincere, He has promised He will forgive us for whatever we've done wrong, you know. And so it's a very, very important understanding to know that there is that connection with your Creator, and that is the be-all and end-all, and that is the ultimate judge. So we here are here to help and support and challenge people who are going through without being too judgmental, with saying, okay, I know this is you, I don't necessarily agree with it, this is what you're going through, this is what you're feeling, I don't agree with it, but I hear you, I see you, I understand you, or I'm trying to understand you, and if I can help you in any way, that's what I want to do.
Is there a third book in the pipeline?
Not for this particular family, although
okay.
I have had people who've read the second book say, please, another story with Azra and Munira and, you know, Farid and all of them, another story. But I just feel, no, I couldn't put this family through another drama again. And my writings will be challenging, you know, they will have to be a challenge. I am writing a third book at the moment. It's not yet titled. I'm loosely calling it She Had Everything. So that's being edited at the moment. And inshallah, if things work out, I will be able to publish that this year. And I'm also working on a collection of short stories.
Wow. Where do you find the energy and the inspiration? Because you need to have a certain kind of mind to be able to put pen to paper with such vivid writing that you start creating pictures in people's minds. And I know we're all blessed with certain gifts, and alhamdulillah, you blessed with the gift of writing. But do you ever suffer from writer's block? And when you do, what do you do to get inspiration all over again?
So I want to say first, alhamdulillah, I'm so blessed. I really am blessed. You know, you've said it for me, but I feel so happy to be able to have found this space and this time in my life to be able to do this because I love it. I always say to people, if I can, you just leave me in the corner and I can just carry on writing. That's what I want to do. Somebody else do the marketing, somebody else do the launches, somebody else do whatever. But it's not always easy, you know. So what I do is I vary my writing, and it depends also on what I'm doing. So when I'm editing, I don't generally get writer's block because there is stuff you're working with and you're correcting and you're fixing and you're changing and you're adapting. But sometimes the writing does take a lot out of you and I need a break. So I might take a break and write a blog or write a poem or work on a short story. So it sort of gives you that break. And I don't worry too much about writer's block because invariably it happens at the beginning of the story, which is when I'm just getting the plot down. You know, my books will go through several versions. So initially I'll just be writing the plot, and if it doesn't work, I know I'm coming back to it, I know I want to fix it, and I might be able to resolve this problem as I'm moving later on. So I just carry on writing. I might skip a section or two, but generally I have a plot outline and I try and follow that and carry on writing, and then there'll be 3, 4, 5 versions. And one of the very, very big briefs that I give to my editor, I work with a professional editor, is apart from ensuring that it's right, it's correct, the timeline is right, the characters are all, you know, consistent throughout. Apart from all of that, let's talk about creating that picture. Have I done enough to describe the people? Have I done enough to describe the environment? And I often work to ensure that without it being in your face, that you are seeing the pictures behind you, you are smelling what's going on, you know, you get the feeling of what the person is feeling internally as well as externally. So I do work hard on that.
Sounds like exhausting work. Like I said, it's a gift, alhamdulillah. In closing then,
yes,
why should we read the book? Let's assume I haven't read Mirror Cracked. Why should I read Fragrance of Forgiveness? And will I be able to pick up a thread? Would I be able to kind of assume that something really dark happened in this family's life?
Yes. Well, ideally, one should read Mirror Cracked first and then Fragrance of Forgiveness. But I have ensured that both books are standalone as well. So if you're not able to, or you don't want to, for whatever reason, read Mirror Cracked, then yes, you can read Fragrance of Forgiveness and you will understand, you know, the situation, because the characters do refer to the past without it becoming too boring, hopefully, for the reader who's read Mirror Cracked as well.
Your advice to young and upcoming, or just upcoming authors, people who've threatened all their lives to write a book but just can't get down to it, what would you say to them?
There's nothing else for it. You just got to sit down and write. You know, it's about commitment and perseverance and all those boring things that they tell you in all the seminars and that's supposed to change your life. It's actually very basic and simple. You have to commit to it, and you actually have to make sure you show up at your notebook or your laptop every day. And sometimes writing might not happen, but it's that commitment and it's that habit, inshallah, that will eventually get you to be able to go there. And also the other thing I would say is, don't be afraid. Don't think you're going to get it right the first time. It's not going to be perfect. And don't be afraid to share your writing with other people, because that immediately opens things up. If you get feedback from people, if you listen to how they're reading it as opposed to what you think you've written, it makes a big difference. And at the end of the day, while there is a good amount of talent, it's also a skill. It can be developed, it can be learned. When I seriously took up writing, I went on 1 or 2 writing courses, because you don't know what you don't know. You have to read, you have to constantly read. But apart from reading, you actually have to make the commitment and sit down and write.
What about someone who has a really deep story to tell but don't know how to write? Would a ghostwriter be the
A ghostwriter is an option. I mean, you can if
and just explain what's a ghostwriter, please.
Okay, so a ghostwriter is somebody, you've got this great story, but you feel you don't, or you can't put it down to paper. So you tell me the story, and together we would write it. So I would write it for you, and you would work with me to do it. So that would be a ghostwriter. So yes, ghostwriting is an option.
And both share credits. You for the writing, me for the story.
Absolutely. Both would share the credits. I mean, unless you have a separate arrangement between the two of you, then that's personal or whatever. But normally a ghostwriter is employed, is paid for the work.
Is it a good idea to go that route?
Well, for me personally, no. For other people, I think yes. Maybe some people would need that. I mean, I've actually once been approached by somebody to write, to ghostwrite for them, and I thought the idea was very intriguing, and I was quite keen to do it. And then she had second thoughts about it. She actually had a collection of letters. She was a white woman, a friend of mine, from between her grandmother and grandfather during the war. And I thought that would be such a beautiful love story to write. But then she said no, the family wasn't happy to do it, so she pulled back. So yeah, it is something I think for the writer as well as the person narrating the story, it's a very enjoyable thing.
And your closing thoughts on Fragrance of Forgiveness?
Please buy the book, please read the book, please share the book. If you like it, put it on social media and tell people about it. I'm self-published. It's not always easy to get out of there, to get the book out there, and the book is sold only through word of mouth. So reviews, if you can read and write a review, I'd be eternally grateful as well.
Wonderful. And I'm going to close with this comment. I've always had a picture in my mind of writers, that they lead this absolutely idyllic life in a beautiful location, just sitting.
One day, inshallah.
Sitting and putting word to paper. So I don't know how right or wrong I am on that.
Well, I'm a busy person. You know, I have a day job that has to pay bills because, of course, I don't make money with this.
Okay.
So I do editing, writing, copywriting for some of my clients. But fortunately, it's flexible. I can do that from home. So I create content for websites, and I work mostly with NGOs because that's my history as well. And I'm a mom of 2 kids. So it's busy.
Well, you have an absolutely fascinating life. May you grow from strength to strength. And we're looking forward to future amazing books from you. Thank you indeed for being with us in studio today.
Thank you so much, Julie. It was lovely being here.
That was the lovely Rashida Khan talking about her book Fragrance of Forgiveness. It's a sequel to Mirror Cracked. And of course, I would urge you to go out and buy it because Mirror Cracked was an awesome book. Don't go away. We have another story to tell right after the ad break. And finally, we're talking to the founder of an organization called Little Green Number. She's Juanita van der Merwe, and she's here to tell us her story. Morning, welcome to the program.
Thank you so much.
Fascinating concept. You're talking Little Green Number, and it's all about recycling of billboards. So first, before we get there, who is Juanita, and what's Juanita's story? What's your qualifications?
So I am a wife, I am a mom of 2, a perfect pigeon pair, so
Lovely.
I've got the best of both worlds. And then as a young person, I always wanted to change the world. So that just from the house that I grew up in, I wasn't really interested in anything like that I could quantify, say I'm an accountant or what. So when I had to choose a direction to study, I studied journalism. I think it's because I had a very strong feeling of what's right and wrong. So I wanted to
tell the
stories,
yeah.
Yes. And then through that, I got opportunities to work at different organizations, which ended me up at an organization in Hillbrow where I worked with the homeless and the destitute, and that introduced me to Little Green Number, and that's where my road with Little Green Number started because, yeah,
You talk about the homeless and the destitute. How difficult or easy was that and what exactly were you doing in helping these people?
So the organization I worked with worked in many areas in South Africa. I was mainly responsible for the resource development, so fundraising. So what they did is they obviously believe that every person has the dignity and the right to dignity. So they treated every person, whether you rich or poor, the same.
Wow.
And that was really beautiful. And that for me, raising funds for that or being a fundraiser was very easy because it was just selling the dream of an equal South Africa, a South Africa where everyone is employed, a South Africa that we all dream of. So raising funds for a vision like that wasn't very difficult.
So I'm just trying to understand the concept, and I hope it's still ongoing.
Yes.
The issue around treating people equally and with dignity. What is it that the organization was doing to get that ethos across to people across the board?
It depended on the needs of the person. So if a person was on the street but they had a matric, then they would take them to the assessment center, look at what the needs are, and then take them further. So if they just wanted to get a job, then they would help them find accommodation and then a job, and make sure if they have any, like if they're addicted to anything, to put them in the right programs. But then some people were kids, so they would then put them in after-school programs, ECD centres, so they've got a very broad spectrum of services.
Wow.
So it depended on exactly the needs per individual, what they would do. But yeah, that's where I got involved.
Sounds amazing. So basically what you're doing is giving hope to people who are truly, truly destitute, giving them hope that, if they believed enough in themselves, worked hard, there is a future for them to better themselves.
Yes.
Is the organization still ongoing?
Yes, I don't know if I'm allowed to.
Yes, of course,
mention
please
it.
go
Yes,
ahead.
So they're called MES, Mold, Empower and Serve, and they do fantastic work all across South Africa.
And they're an NGO, NPO?
NPO, yes.
Okay. Now, how long did you spend there?
I worked there from 2009 to 2011, beginning of 2012, and then my husband and I took a year off and traveled the world and did
Your gap year.
Yes, a gap year, but it was with a Christian organization, so doing relief work and working at different organizations across the globe.
So you're still immersed in all of this humanitarian
Yes.
upliftment programs, and I think it's amazing. God bless, that's all I can say
Thank
to
you.
You then went on and you joined another company, and that's where Little Green Number was born.
Yes.
Who is the company? Why did you join them? What were the events that unfolded there that gave birth to such an amazing concept?
So the concept was birthed way before me. The concept came when an advertising company realized that these billboards are being generated and they've got nowhere to go. So they just started thinking more sustainably. What can we do with these materials? The material, because it's PVC, lends itself to being made into a bag. But in 2012, as I said, I was traveling the world, and at that time the MES decided to close down this job creation project. It was called Waste to Wow back then, because it was run as a charity, so they were dependent on people's donations to pay salaries. I was very interested, obviously, in the concept of doing social good, but then being confronted with always expecting handouts, expecting donations, knowing how difficult it can be to raise funds, I was very interested in the concept of social business as introduced by Muhammad Yunus. So I read all of his books, did a lot of research, and was really intrigued by the way that he is giving dignity and giving loans and stuff to people.
You're talking about Muhammad Yunus from
Yes,
Bangladesh?
Yes,
Okay.
yes. So he's kind of our social entrepreneurship hero. So
Right.
everything we did, we based on what we've learned from his experiences. And then in 2012, I asked, can we please have the opportunity to try and change this failing charity by implementing business principles. So seeing if a charity can be turned into a sustainable business, and then if it can actually make some money. So we run ourselves on a triple bottom line, where we say, people, we need to provide for our people. It has to be sustainable. It has to be a good income for our people. Planet, try and be good to our planet. This is a hazardous material. Can we recycle it? Can we repurpose it, turn it into something new? And then lastly, profit, because if you don't make a profit, you can't be a business. So that's how I started experimenting with Little Green Number.
How much of research and thinking went into this concept? Because you have told me that you've got 10 people in your employ, so
Yes.
you've created opportunities for X amount of people, and they are making a living out of this, as are you.
Yes.
But obviously, to turn it into a profitable organization, you needed to truly do your research, your homework, to make sure that it works and works well. And did you have to knock on doors to get startup funding? Talk us through that process, because undoubtedly there are a lot of people in your situation who would like to do a lot of good. But as you say, you can't be going out for handouts. People are exhausted in giving handouts. There's so many people knocking on your door, and there's just X amount of people you can help and not anymore.
I think the important thing is we didn't try to reinvent the wheel because there were no local projects in South Africa. We went to research the overseas concepts and the overseas project. So I'm saying we because this was very much done hand in hand with my dad. He is a very successful businessman. So he came from the business side, I came from the charity side, and somewhere we believe there's a middle way. There's a way that both of these worlds and the good things that they bring to the world can benefit the business industry as well as the NPO industry. So we literally just read and read and read and read. And I did a few online courses on social entrepreneurship and social business. It's starting to become more popular, especially overseas. But yeah, there was a lot of reading material available. And then the important thing for us was trial and error. So we don't believe we found the solution to poverty and unemployment yet, but we believe there is a better way of trying to address these needs. So we try, and if we fail fast, we fail forward, we continue, we stand up, we lift ourselves up, and we just try something new.
And as you sit here, you've made a difference to 10 families. To 10 families who can hold their heads up high and say, I am gainfully employed. But going right back to your dad, him believing in your concept, your social awareness concept, how much of trial and error are you talking about here? And you also talk about the NPO that you've registered. And I know every second person these days are wanting to go the NPO route because then it's tax, you don't pay tax.
Yes.
How easy or difficult is that process, and what sort of testimonials or guarantees do you need to put in place for them to consider you as an NPO?
So we've actually disbanded the NPO because we want to get rid of we're a charity. We want to be known as a business that stands for business principles, that people can see like we are completely transparent.
But there would be tax implications then, obviously.
Yes, so what we do is we have a buy one, give one philosophy. So that's how we try to address that, saying that if a client buys their corporate gifts from us or their conference bags, we will, for every bag they buy, give them a bag to donate for their CSI. So because we can't give them the PBO benefits or the 18A tax certificates, we have tried to find another way where they can still do their CSI projects.
And is that viable for both you and the corporate?
Yes. So we've seen very great results in that. People are very surprised. They can't believe that there's a business that will give you a bag to donate for free. For us, the only prerequisite is it has to go to a school child. And then they are welcome to do it as part of their CSI. It doesn't have to come back to me.
Okay, we're talking little green number, and all we've been talking about is the background work that's gone into this project. Let's go for an ad break. When we come back, we'll talk exactly what is little green number, what is this product that we're talking about. We'll unfold that, and then we'll talk more about the challenges and the successes that you've enjoyed thus far. Juanita van der Merwe is talking to us about Little Green Number, a company she's founded, and if you're wondering what exactly it is, she'll tell us all about it right after the break. We're talking to Juanita van der Merwe from an organization called Little Green Number, and it's all about sustainability and it's also about job creation. Now, we're talking Little Green Number, and I'm sure people are wondering, what on earth are we talking about? And you're talking about creating bags and things for, paraphernalia for corporates. Show us what you have on your lap. And I also know that as we speak, there's a lot of pictures being flashed on screen, but it's always nice to get the feel of things.
Yes.
So tell me what you have on your lap.
So as we all know, the billboards next to the highways, when they get taken down, they've got nowhere to go. And then what we do is we literally just take the PVC material that's already printed. We don't reprint, we don't add anything to it. We cut it up and then...
Are you allowed to take the stuff? Do you have a relationship with the billboard, the people who put them up and take them down?
Yes.
And do you have to pay for taking that away?
So we were started in 1999 by Prime Media. So therefore we still get the products up to today for free because we are solving their problem.
Yes.
We don't pay for the product. We're not at a point yet where they're paying us to solve their problem, but they do give us the PVC material for free.
What about all the other paraphernalia? Is there anything else that you discard?
At the moment, we only use the billboards, the PVC. You get different types of billboards. So you get a tarpaulin, you get fabric, you get a mesh.
And you use all of it?
We use all of it, yes. And then everything that we don't use, we recycle through a recycling company ourselves.
Okay, so that is a pencil case,
Yes, so these are the two products that the corporates will have a choice then to say we want to donate. So it's either a school bag or a pencil case, depending on the age of the child.
Okay, and this is amazing. This is the school bag. It's a backpack, a school bag, and it's made of a very, very durable plastic. This is amazing. I think this will last the child the entire school life.
Yes.
What is this? What sort of plastic is this?
So that is a truck tarpaulin. So it's got a fabric and a plastic layer, which makes it very strong and durable. Some of our products only has the PVC, which doesn't have that softness of the fabric. But yeah, it's very durable. The reality is every single billboard that has ever been printed still exists. So that's how durable they are. They are still going to exist for a few hundred years to come. So we are not stopping the production of it. We are finding another use for it so that it doesn't end up on our landfills.
So you're being very environmentally friendly, but what's going to happen? As durable as this is, it's going to start scuffing and cracking and breaking eventually.
Yes.
So 12 years later, it's not going to be used by the school child any longer.
Yes.
What is going to happen to this piece of scrap then? Because it's a type of plastic that's going to be here for another 200-300 years.
Yes.
What is your suggestion when you on-sell the stuff? What do you tell the consumer to do with it once they don't have any use for it?
Yeah, so what we hope is that people can always return their products to us, and then we can find either ways to recycle them or to turn them into another product. So we have a few clients, but the reality is in South Africa we have a throw everything in the dustbin mentality.
True.
We don't have a repurpose or recycle attitude yet, and there are beautiful initiatives going up even by our municipality of trying to introduce recycling into our houses, separation at source. So these are things I think that if every household start doing that, and that's going to make a tremendous difference in the world.
In terms of you're talking about two products here, and you've also told me that you employ 10 people on a full-time basis. What about expanding? And you also told me that you manufacture about 3,000 items per month.
Yes.
In terms of more job creation?
So expansion, obviously, if we want to eradicate unemployment, we want to expand. But we were faced with a question, do we want to employ more people at a lower income or less people at a higher income? And we made the decision for the less people at a higher income, just because I was at a conference once where they mentioned, just flippantly, 3,000 Rand in a household will break the cycle of poverty. To me, that sounded ridiculous, trying to put myself in that situation. So we went on a thumb suck then, saying we want our people to earn at least 6,000. No reason, no mathematical equation, just from a thumb suck. Recently, when the minimum wage was raised to 3,500. We raised our minimum to 7,000. Again, just doubling minimum wage, hoping that from that basic income, people can just regain their humanity, regain their dignity, and see, even though I'm doing a low income job, I can earn a good income if I keep busy. and do like a proper or a good job. Yes.
And we know that each person that is gainfully employed impacts positively 16 other people in that family unit, the extended family unit. So amazing stuff. Keep up the great work. Future plans in terms of a Little Green Number? I know that you're wanting to be as sustainable as possible. I also know that you want to keep it to a minimum, 10 people, but pay them a decent salary.
Yes.
But human nature is such that we do want to grow, we want to be better, we want to touch more lives. Anything on the horizon?
So I obviously always want to grow the brand so that people know the name Little Green Number. And then on the other hand, we would love to, and we have started to go into the export market. So to make the proudly, locally South African made products available to the rest of the world.
And how's that taking off?
We did one trade show, then I started my family, so it's been on the
So it's been on hold
on
for
hold
now.
for a little bit. Now my kids are getting a bit older again, so mommy can leave for a while, because it just entails me to travel a bit more. So
Why the name Little Green Number? What is that saying to the world?
So the significance is every single word sums up a part of what we do. Little is saying we're not creating 500 jobs, we're creating 10, but it's a little, but everyone has to start somewhere. The green captures the environment and the recycling, and then the number is the uniqueness of the product. So as you can see, when a billboard is cut, that piece has been cut, it's done, it's forever, nothing can be reproduced. So the products will, every single one will look differently. So it's our promise to the client that that uniqueness of every person is captured in the uniqueness of your bag.
Juanita, we know that this world is full of people who have great ideas, entrepreneurs. There are not enough jobs to go around. And the moment somebody introduces something new on the market, 100,000 or 100 other people will try and copy the concept, and they will then emulate it. How are you prepared for this type of competition?
I welcome it. So I have, in the past few years, we've seen a few companies start up doing exactly the same. I've even had some of my competition ask me for quotes because they can't address the need, or they can't manufacture at the tempo that I can. I'm very open to share, very honest, very transparent. So one of my biggest competitors and I contact each other when we see this order is too big for us to do, and we work together. So I think there's a place for everyone in the world. Obviously, we've never had an instance or an issue where we were going under because of the competition. But I think because I do what I do in excellence, because I do what I do, and I'm always honest and transparent, people respect that. So I am known in the industry where, like, if people had to choose between me and one of my competitors, they've dealt with me before, we've been around for a while, they know we do business in an honorable way. So I feel that gets seen and that gets honored. So I'm not gonna start like dissing my competition anytime soon, because I believe there's a space for all of
everyone
us.
in the world. Very honorable of you, I must say. Going forward, seeing that there is competition, are you thinking then of perhaps reinventing or possibly doing something else and offering it to the marketplace? Because you can source only X amount of backpacks and pencil cases, or even handbags for ladies for that matter. What are the ideas going forward?
So we're trying to stay current. So if there's a new technology like iPads and that, to have covers for that, because we all know once you drop your iPad, it cracks. So we try to stay current with that. We're also trying to experiment with other materials. It does come down to, we need to stick to our ethos and to using only recycled or repurposed material. So everything comes down to, does it gel with what we do and who we stand, or what we stand for? And if it does, then we are more than willing to expand and try new avenues.
And your closing remarks to our viewers today. Can ordinary consumers off the street be able to buy your bags, and where and how do they get them?
They can buy them on RSA Made. It's a website for proudly South African products. They can buy them from my shop in Bryanston. All of the details are on my website.
Little green number.
Yes, littlegreennumber.com. And then my closing remark is just that every single person on this planet can make a difference if you care for the one in front of you.
Absolutely. Very honorable and dignified, I might add. Lovely talking to you. Please carry on doing what you're doing. You're doing the right thing, even if it's only touching 10 lives. But I think you are reaching, your reach is very far, and you're an amazing example to our Rainbow Nation.
Thank you so much.
My pleasure. And there you have it, closing off on a very positive note from a very big-hearted person who is a humanitarian, Juanita van der Merwe from Little Green Number. What a heartwarming story. So you see, you and I and each and every one of us can make a difference if we just applied our minds. And on that note then, time for us to wrap up. Thank you for being with us on this Saturday morning. Please take care on the roads. A big thank you to the Let's Talk production team. And as always, from me, Julie Alli, till the next time, it is Assalamu alaikum and Khuda Hafiz.
يا هلا 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 حن قلبي على جمعة الخير هلا حن قلبي على جمعة الخير هلا يا هلا يا هلا يا هلا يا هلا يا هلا يا